welcome to the 76th episode of LA Rams Central. I'm Anthony. Eric?
What?
I'm Anthony.
I'm Eric.
There we go. Sorry, there's like a delay or something going on. I'm going to leave that in just for blooper purposes because then it sounded like I had no one on the phone. Indianapolis, Buffalo. I'm going to go ahead and cover this one. Snow Bowl. Pretty good game, 7-7. Not a lot you can do on defense when you're playing in that kind of weather. Not a lot you can do on offense. Not a lot of energy or enthusiasm when you're in those games, except for the boyhood excitement of playing in the snow. Game was won on a touchdown run by LaShawn McCoy. What was interesting is the play before, LaShawn McCoy was just destroyed. Not with a physical hit, but just the entire play got blown up in the backfield and he went right down, creating a second and long situation, which I think the Colts might have thought they were going to try and throw out of that, but they came right back with Shady, and he took it to the house for the game-winning touchdown. Eric, you called it. We both picked Indy, but you called it in the sense that you said Indy's been playing really tough football down the stretch here, and they did it yet again on the road against a tough opponent in some really tough conditions. And for a dome team to play as well as they did defensively, I was pretty impressed with that game overall. But in the end, Buffalo gets the win.
Yeah, the only two things I want to mention, actually I got one question for you regarding this game, and then I want to mention one thing. The cheapest ticket to watch this game was $4. Run.
Oh, I would have gone. To see a snow game? Are you kidding me? Yeah.
So we have the ice bowl, we have the fog bowl, we have the snow globe game. That's basically what it looked like. It was just basically looked like a stadium being shook up in snow the whole time, and it just kept falling. The other thing I want to mention is that you're not really going to see this much in the box score unless you really look, but Adam Vinatieri missed a couple of field goals. Could cost himself $500,000 in incentives unless he goes 5 for 5 over the next 3 games. So, it was windy, it was snowy, he didn't have the best of days. Even the extra point to tie it up at 7-7 was a little wild in itself, but he hung in there. I was actually surprised, but when it's a game like that under those conditions, you don't expect high scoring or one team to blow out another. You expect it to be close.
Yeah, his extra point looked like it was no good. Oh, it's good. It snuck in there. So it definitely had some hook action on it. Minnesota, Carolina, Eric. Once again, the Vikings continue to try to just absolutely piss me off. Every time I pick against them, they win, and every time I pick them, they lose. So I'm picking Minnesota the rest of the year.
Yeah, in this game, Minnesota was bound to lose sooner or later, and they played a tough opponent in Carolina. And Cam Newton had a really good game. Adam Thielen went over 100 yards. Devin Funchess had 50 yards and a touchdown. He actually got tripped down most of the day by Xavier Rhodes, but actually ended up breaking free and actually putting up a decent line there. Keenan had a good game, but 2 interceptions came back to haunt him. But to me, the real story in this game was the Panthers and their offense and Jonathan Stewart. He had over 100 yards rushing. It was Minnesota's time to lose, and I'm sure they would rather. Obviously, they would rather not lose, but if you're going to pick a time to lose, this would be it, because now that 2 of the next 3 are at home, one of them, one of the road games is in Green Bay. So they got the Bengals at the Packers and then the Bears. So I would expect them to go no worse than 2-1 in that regards. But I don't think the loss hurt them that much because they hold the tiebreaker over the Rams. They hold the tiebreaker over New Orleans. So they're going to be fighting with Philly, and we're going to get into Philly here shortly. And we'll transpire to that game. But Minnesota's still in a good position.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the loss didn't hurt them that much. So the only thing I want to comment on the Bear game was I had said earlier in last week's show that the Bears had beaten the tar off the Bengals twice in the 80s, and those were the games I really remember.
Yeah, I thought about that every time I was looking at the Bears score. Seriously, I'm like, Anthony, this freaking historic Bear-Bengals stat.
Well, the thing is, I do want to make one correction. In 89, the Bears beat the Bengals 17-14. It was actually a good game. It was 86 when they beat the pants off them 44-7, and I just thought, the Bears they played a whale of a game. They had it clicking, and Cincinnati this year, they're not a strong team, but they're not that bad. They're not 33-7 bad, but I just had a feeling that the Bears, if they were going to win this game, it was going to be a big-time win, not a close one. But we both picked Cincinnati, but I'm sure you watched the game, so walk us through it.
Yeah, I was able to catch quite a bit of the game. Jordan Howard was beast mode. It was basically like he was on fire in NBA Jam, and he just kept running and running and running. The Bears did what they had to do as far as, let's just keep getting Jordan Howard the rock or the football and let him do his thing. Trubisky had a great game. He actually ended up finishing with a higher QBR this week than Tom Brady. I mean, Trubisky's been in the bottom five roughly the whole year since he started, and when you have a better week than Brady, it's something to kind of motivate you a little bit.
Yeah.
But he didn't have any mistakes. The Bears defense shut down the Bengals. I mean, after the Bears, which is funny because the Bears scored a touchdown, and last year the Bengals kicker was Mike Nugent, who missed 5 extra points and a few field goals. He was cut. The Bears signed their kicker that they had earlier this year, who they ended up cutting, Connor Barth. Then they signed Cairo Santos, who tweaked his groin against San Francisco. After they put him on IR, the Bears said, we're going to sign Mike Nugent. So what did the Bears do? They score a touchdown to go up 6-0, and Nugent misses the extra point. Bengals take the ensuing kickoff. They drive. They score a touchdown, go up 7-6. That was their only lead of the game.
That's funny.
And, the Bears played the best football they have all season from start to finish. Probably their second best game of the year as far as offensive efficiency. I know they have 4 wins, but when I look at it, it's 3 out of those 4 wins are against the AFC North. They have one more game, and I'll throw this stat out here at you as well for the Bears. They got Cleveland in a couple of weeks, and if they go 4-0, it'll be the second year in a row. Obviously, they play every 4 years. It'll be the second year in a row they've gone 4-0 against the AFC North.
That's crazy.
So, maybe the Bears should move to the AFC North. I don't know. But yeah, they played a complete game. Trubisky looked good. Shaheem looked good. He played a lot. And the whole talk radio the week leading up to was, why is Shaheem not playing more? That was a big question. As bad as they are, he should be playing a lot more. And he wasn't, but he got in a lot of snaps. He caught a touchdown. Howard ran crazy, and Trubisky played one heck of a game for the Bears to win. And to me, it's a confidence booster. But I think that confidence is going to last only about 6 days, if you ask me. But we'll get into the Bears next game when we preview it. But we'll see what they can do.
Yeah. So, did you know, Eric, that no quarterback has ever won the Super Bowl without winning the Super Bowl first?
Is this a trick question?
No. According to all the people on ESPN and the NFL Network, no quarterback has ever gone to the Super Bowl until they've won it first. So let me explain. Everyone right now is picking the Packers and Saints to go to the Super Bowl in the NFC because they've been there and they've won it before. And I'm thinking to myself, Bart Starr didn't go before Super Bowl 1. Terry Bradshaw didn't go before Super Bowl 9. Joe Montana didn't go before Super Bowl 16. I want to know when it became a requirement to go to the Super Bowl until you've gone to the Super Bowl.
Well, somebody should tell these guys that if the playoffs started today, the Packers wouldn't make it.
Not only that, and I'll get to this when we get to the Rams, but if I hear one more person say that the Rams have Jared Goff, who's a second-year quarterback, in the same sentence as saying the Eagles aren't going to the Super Bowl because they lost Carson Wentz, I'm going to punch a unicorn in the throat. I'm going to. I will find one in the woods outside of Harry Potter's castle and punch one in the throat. I'm done. These people are living in fantasy land, so finding a unicorn wouldn't be too difficult. But I will get into that. So Green Bay beats Cleveland barely. I think a better way of putting it is Cleveland beat Cleveland once again.
Yes, that is very true.
The Browns, once again, did not utilize Duke Johnson nearly enough unless he's injured. Is he injured?
Not that I'm aware of.
Are you sure? Because he was MIA in the entire fourth quarter.
Nothing. Let's see here. Let me look it up real quick. But keep going.
Okay, because here's the problem that I have. I don't think he was injured. Once again, the Cleveland Browns head coach, Hugh Jackson, and this one goes to you, Connie, 1970, because you seem to think every single head coach in the NFL is a genius and a wonder child and knows what they're doing. Here's coaching 101 for you. I learned this in high school. Put your best player on the field when the game is on the line and get them the ball. Not hard to do. There isn't anybody on that football team, including Josh Gordon, or whatever his name is, the wide receiver, who's been missing for 3 years because of legal trouble, is better than Duke Johnson II on that team. And he's nowhere on the field. Nowhere on the field. No, they're putting the ball in Kaiser's hand.
He is not injured.
Yeah, I didn't think so. So, essentially, Green Bay gets the win, not because Hundley was impressive. If you watch the game, he was anything but impressive. But considering who he was playing against, there's a reason the Green Bay Packers are going to play Aaron Rodgers this week. Because they believe they have an outside shot at the playoffs, and Hundley has zero chance of winning the next 3 games. Zero. You know, you could beat up on the Cleveland Browns and the New York Giants or whoever the hell they played the last couple of weeks. But when you got to step it up against, the Buccaneers. But when you got to step it up against a real team, you need to bring in the big gun. Aaron Rodgers will not win 2 of these next 3 games. He will lose to Minnesota and he will lose to Carolina. He may beat Detroit in Week 17. So I hope it's worth it because you're putting his career in jeopardy. Just FYI on that. So let me walk you through Green Bay. So essentially what happened was the Browns had the lead. They went into a shell on defense. Hundley did an effective job of getting the ball to his wide receivers against a prevent defense. And then as they went up the field, Cleveland decided to do some very predictable blitzes. No disguising to it whatsoever. Exposing it, allowing him to make a quick hot read. And then when they did have Hundley, they couldn't tackle him and he broke for big gains, which is why they scored in overtime. Much like the Buccaneer game. So Green Bay 7-6. Do they have a tiebreaker over Seattle?
Well, Seattle's 8-5, so.
Did they beat Seattle head-to-head is what I'm asking.
Oh, yeah, they beat them in week 1.
Because
I'm sorry. Yes. Packers beat them in week 1.
Because I will tell you right now, I actually wouldn't mind playing Green Bay in the first playoff game. Because that is a team we would absolutely annihilate. Aaron Rodgers is not going to be able to scramble against that defense because we played Russell Wilson. And even if he does get the chunk plays or gets outside the pocket, that shoulder's limited, and he's one Aaron Donald smack away from bringing in Hundley. So bring on the Packers. I have no issue with it. I don't think they're going to get that far, but be careful what you wish for, NFL, because I think Goff would outperform him right now. Not because Goff is better than Aaron Rodgers right now, but because he has a better team around him, which brings me to my point that I'm going to make with the Rams. The better team gets to the Super Bowl, not the quarterback with Super Bowl experience. That's how it's always worked, and that's how it's always going to work. So we'll get into that much, much later. But essentially, yeah, Green Bay wins, Aaron Rodgers comes back, and everyone seems to have the Packers penciled in as a playoff team. San Francisco, Houston, I'm not going to call my shots too often, but this really was the difference between me and you, Eric. You went 6-10, I went 7-9. I went with San Francisco. I felt really good about about Jimmy Garoppolo in this game, and Jimmy G looked good considering. Look, the 49ers have their quarterback of the future. There's no doubt about it. And to be able to have a high draft pick and go into this next draft and either trade out and get a boatload of picks or get an A-plus quality player at another position other than quarterback in the first round, the 49ers and Rams rivalry is going to return with a bloody vengeance. And Seattle and Arizona are going to fall by the wayside. I'm telling you right now. This is going to be an interesting thing to watch in the future. I don't think the Niners win another game this year, but I just figured Houston was a good spot for them with Savage being Savage and Garoppolo being Garoppolo and that running game in San Francisco being moderately decent. You know, I figured this would be kind of a good 2-0 start for Jimmy G as they head down the stretch of the season. Watch the game. He had a couple of really good completions on third down, threw a laser right between two defenders on a crucial second down and long situation that allowed for them to convert and keeping them out of a third and long situation. Didn't make too many bad mistakes with the football. His stat line was okay. You know, he's not serviceable, but he's still learning the system. I think he's going to be better than serviceable. I think he's going to be really, really good. But Oakland, Kansas City, E, take it away.
Well, Kansas City looked like the team that actually started playing the first 5 weeks of the season. And, you know, give it up to Kansas City. They decided to show up when the time was right. We'll see if it was an anomaly or not. This week was another big showdown against division foe. But Kansas City ended up winning 26-15. Travis Kelce missed a monstrous day by he almost scored 3 touchdowns. One that was called back on penalty. One they rolled him down inside 5, closer to 1, which was run in, and just missed another one to where we dropped a wide open pass. So that score could have been a lot bigger than what it seemed. Kareem Hunt decided to come out of the shell. I still think it's Alvin Kamara's award to win, especially if he comes back in the next game against the Jets. I think Hunt's just had too many mediocre games to basically give that award up. But yeah, it was Oakland all day, majority of the day. Oakland tried to make it a game late in the second half, but it was just too much to overcome. So Kansas City has the division. Actually, do they? Let me look at that right now really quick because I think I might be putting my foot in my mouth.
No, Kansas City has the division.
Kansas City has the division lead by currently half a game over the Chargers, even though they have the same record.
Because they beat them head-to-head.
Yeah, correct.
Yep. All right. Yeah, I was impressed with the Chiefs. I thought it was a big, big win. I think they're going to come on strong here at the end of the year. I actually think they're going to beat San Diego this week when we do our picks. I'm picking them to win. I just think that they're going to be really tough to beat at Arrowhead, basically, and they're getting playoff games under their belt early, which I think can only help a football team. Detroit at Tampa Bay, Eric, take it away.
Detroit at Tampa, the final score and who won was who I thought was going to win. Detroit won by a field goal. I was actually surprised that Tampa kept it as close as they did. Stafford decided to show up 381 yards passing. Leading receiver for the Lions was actually Eric Ebert. He caught 10 of 11 targets. Where have you been all the last year and a half? So that was a big deal for him. But Tampa Bay really playing for nothing. They kept it a game. Obviously, they were at home. Detroit on the road in December. Not the greatest team. Not the greatest team to rely on for the win either. When it comes to Detroit, they needed it. They have the big division game coming up, and they're tied with Green Bay in the one-loss column, but have that head-to-head, and this is why Detroit's a little bit ahead of Green Bay in that playoff spot because they beat them. So,
yep.
And Detroit bragged on a win, and that's what you got to do on the road in December if you want to be a playoff team.
Definitely, it helps playing in Tampa Bay. Dallas at the Giants. Take it away.
Dallas at the Giants. This was close early, and it was blowout late. Dak Prescott had a huge game, throwing the ball all over the field to Terrence Williams, to Des Bryant, who had a 50-yard touchdown catch, to Jason Witten, leading receiver. Would you even think to know that it was backup running back Rod Smith?
Oh, wow.
He had a huge game, both running and receiving, 2 touchdowns, and the Giants really had no answer for Dallas. The Giants are just trying to get through this season, and it's going to be quite an interesting offseason for the Giants. But Dallas is still trying to keep those slim playoff hopes alive. So they get Ezekiel Elliott back in 2 weeks. So we'll see how that handles. But I think that they may be a little bit too far down that playoff line. I mean, they're 7-6. So
Dallas actually, Eric.
There's a lot of teams that are 7-6.
But Dallas has the inside track. Outside of Atlanta, they've beaten Seattle, Green Bay.
Atlanta's 6. Dallas is 10th right now. Dallas has to climb over 1, 2, 3, 4 teams to get there.
I'm just telling you, though, they have the tiebreaker over Seattle if they end up with the same record. Atlanta obviously gets a tiebreaker over them, as does Green Bay. But Green Bay plays Carolina, Minnesota, and Detroit. And Atlanta plays New Orleans and Carolina in the next 3 weeks. So, those 2 teams I'm not too worried about. Seattle plays the Rams this week. If the Rams beat them and Dallas wins, Dallas is in pretty good position. So, it's going to take them to run the table. But I think Dallas, to me, has the best track right now to go to the playoffs if they win out. Obviously,
well, I mean, that would have been easier if Atlanta would have lost last Thursday.
Well, but Atlanta's going to lose to New Orleans in New Orleans, so
right.
And then then it's going to be up to them to beat Carolina to get in, because Atlanta, Seattle right now is in the worst position because they don't have tiebreakers over any of the teams right now that are 7-6. None of them. Atlanta beat them. Dallas they have to play. So if Dallas beats them next week, not this week, that's the week Ezekiel Elliott comes back, which they should beat them. They're at home. If Dallas can beat Seattle, Seattle's hurting in multiple ways.
But you're looking further down the road in the next couple of weeks. But Seattle has the tiebreaker currently over the Rams, especially if they beat the Rams on Sunday.
Well, they're not going to, so that's irrelevant. Frogs had wings. They wouldn't bump their rear ends when they hop. I'm not worried about this game against Seattle. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. I wasn't worried about the Philadelphia game until about the second quarter. I'll explain that when we get to that game. But, even if the Rams do lose to Philly, or to Seattle, Seattle still has Dallas, which they're not going to win, which then makes them 6 losses, and the Rams would only be a 5-loss team. So the Rams would regain the division in 2 weeks. Seattle would drop, and Dallas would bump over them because they get the tiebreaker because they beat them head-to-head. So really, Seattle has to win out, in my opinion. Because Green Bay, you just said they played in week 1. Green Bay beat them. They have the tiebreaker. If Dallas beats them, they'd have the tiebreaker. Atlanta has the tiebreaker. I don't think they played New Orleans. So, that's going to have to come down to a completely different equation. But with all the conference losses that they have, I would imagine New Orleans would get the tiebreaker over them too. Depending what the tiebreakers are. Arizona, Tennessee, I'm going to get into this one a little bit. This was an old-fashioned 1980s football game. It was actually a really fun game from what I saw, and I've been watching a little bit living in Arizona. Of course, they played a lot of the highlights, but 12-7, good defense. They both showed up. I was really impressed with Arizona's defense. If you look at their stat line, they held the number 1 rushing offense to next to nothing all game long. Forced Mariota to beat him, and Mariota, he's getting better, but he's not there yet. He's still, I think, having effects of that injury. Arizona bottled him up, shut him down, and did a great job. And I was impressed on 2 fronts with Arizona. I was impressed with their front 7 at stopping the run, but I was also impressed with their offensive line in opening up holes and allowing that team to run the ball for if you look at their stat line, it doesn't blow you away. But one of the things that Wolfley was saying out here in Arizona was, It was the type of runs that they had. They would have a 4-yard run, which would create 3rd and short. They'd have a 6-yard run on 2nd and 5 and creating a 1st down. They averaged something like 4 or 5 yards a carry in the game, almost 6 yards a carry. So, it was effective enough to get them in position to score. And then with the way their front seven was playing, Tennessee was in a world of hurt. So big win for Arizona. They continue to be kind of a weird team. I think they're going to end up 8-8, 7-9, somewhere around there. We'll see what they do at Seattle at the end of the year. But they're kind of an odd team at the moment. Obviously, for them to go 8-8, they're going to have to win out.
Question for you.
Hmm?
Does the collective fan base of Titan Nation still want my head on a platter?
Yeah, I don't know about that. You did pick Arizona, too. Probably. Let's ask. So you guys out there, if you're a Titan fan, tell me if you want Eric's head on a platter, and, we'll straight up Vlad the Impaler him on the next show for you if you'd like. Although, just so you know, Eric's face is really weird. He's got a crack right down the center of his face, and his mouth is actually where his butthole is. So,
Whatever.
New York at Denver. I told you. Denver's defense is still Denver's defense. And can we finally admit that McCown is still McCown? Going up to the rarefied air of Denver and playing against that team, 8 losses or not, the team that was entering the field, known as the New York Football Jets, was not a team that was going to intimidate anybody. And Denver was saying, if we're going to get right, we're going to get right this week against that team. And that's exactly what they did. Did they end up shutting them out? Was it 23-0 final?
Jets, it was 23-0 Denver.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets didn't even puncture the scoreboard. So you're not going to be able to play an effective game when you're an aerial team only against Denver. The teams that have beaten Denver in this 8-game losing streak figured out they can run the ball, they can force turnovers against that quarterback, they can work with a short field, and they can pile up the points, either be a field goal or touchdown on a shorter field. But if you're going to come in thinking you're going to throw to Robbie Anderson and wing the ball over the field for 350 yards against the no-fly zone defense, which still has Akeem Talib, which still has those corners, you're wrong. You're going to have to find traditional ways to beat them. They're still too good of a defense for a one-dimensional offense to beat them. And I know the Jets have run the ball well this year, but they didn't even try to run the ball this week. And maybe that's because they were down early, but it almost looked like they were thinking, hey, we can pad some stats here. But it's kind of like that baseball player that goes to, plays the Colorado Rockies in Colorado and goes, oh, I'm swinging for the fences because I can jack up my home run totals. And they end up going, 1 for 8 for the series with a single. Just play your game and let it happen, and you'll be fine. And the Jets didn't do that.
I'd like to add a couple of things to this game.
Mm-hmm.
First, Josh McCown broke his left hand. He's out for the rest of the year. So Bryce Petty will be starting the rest of the season, unless he, of course, gets hurt. And then Christian Haggard, which they don't want to see the field.
No.
To me, this game was an anomaly. Denver's still not that good. They just played a team that probably just kept its best players back in New Jersey and watched the game on the TV on the Jumbotron while the Giants were playing and losing.
This isn't the NBA.
What's that?
This isn't the NBA.
No. I still don't think Denver's that good. I mean, their defense is decent, but they've got so many things going wrong with the quarterback play. They can't figure out the running back situation. They have 2 great wide receivers, and they just can't get on the ball, it seems. And
Eric, I'm not saying Denver's great. I'm just saying I felt like they were a much better team than the Jets. And I'm right.
Well, I mean, they beat the Jets, so yes, that day they were better than the Jets. So I'll give you that. But it was, you even look at the stats in this game, and Simeon was at 200 yards, C.J. Anderson 48, Demaryius Thomas 93. I know their defense played really good in the game, and that's why the offense didn't need to pad their stats. But it was one of those games where, and Denver plays Thursday night, which we'll get into, which again, we have to be subjected to Denver again this year.
Yeah. Washington at the Chargers. I don't even want to talk about this game.
Well, I mean, what can I say? You know, Washington didn't show up either. They got blitzed and blitzed hard, and not just by the defense, but by the Chargers offense. I told you, the Chargers are humming. And Philip Rivers is playing great football right now. Keenan Allen had over 100 yards. So, you know, where was Josh Norman? Did he even show up? Did he even play?
I don't know.
He was there.
He was there.
Tyrell Williams had a hard. What's that?
He was there, but I think he was representing a piece of toast that you left in the toaster for too long.
Oh, okay. Tyrell Williams had 132 yards, so it didn't matter what side that Norman lined up on. They were getting burned either way. Washington tried to make it close late, but again, when you're down for most of the game, 23 to 6 or 23 to 7, and you know, ends up being 30 to 13. You know, this to me, I thought it could have been a trap game for San Diego. Gosh darn it, I sound like you.
Just go with it, Eric. It's gonna happen.
So, you know, like I said, I thought it could have been a trap game for the Chargers because everybody had been looking ahead to their visit to Kansas City in the coming week. But they didn't hold back. They took their frustrations out on whatever frustrations they had out on the Redskins, and yeah, the Redskins have been really reeling up pretty much all year.
Yeah, two things on this. First of all, for the Charger fans out there, I will defend you here. The Chargers don't have the luxury of trap games. They have to win every single game to get in, and they knew it. So there was not a snowball's chance in Hades. They were going to overlook this team because they overlook anybody and they lose, they're done. They're D-O-N-E done, and they know it. The other thing that I want to say is I said that Josh Norman represented a piece of toast that was left in the toaster too long. Let me explain for some of you that were wondering what I meant by that. He was burnt like toast all day long. We had a football player on my team when I played high school football. He was a DB, and his nickname was BLT, and it stood for burnt like toast because he got beat by everybody, okay? And that was Norman, Josh Norman this week. He was burnt like toast. He was BLT'd all day long, every day. So it was frustrating to watch because he was nowhere to be found. I'm actually going to skip Seattle and Philadelphia real quick because I think that's going to take the longest time. I want to jump to Pittsburgh and New England because I'm probably like 99% of the population. We didn't watch it. We didn't care. None of those games were intriguing, and none of those games were good or worth watching. So you take them away because I know you did.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, and I didn't put these words to it, but I mentioned that the last week that the Titans were playing close games, and sometimes you lose those close games. Well, Pittsburgh played Baltimore Sunday night, and Pittsburgh played with fire. And Pittsburgh came out unscathed. They somehow pulled off a miraculous 39-38 victory. If you had any questions about Antonio Brown at all, at any time in your life, especially this year, you know, I know he threw a little temper tantrum earlier in the year. 213 yards later, all is forgiven. Maybe not all, but, I mean, 213 yards is nothing to sneeze at either. Roethlisberger, 506 yards passing. They pretty much abandoned the run when they had to. I feel like Baltimore had this game. They just forgot how to put teams away. You know, they've either been able to beat teams that put them away or have kind of a lead, keep that momentum going for them, and then relinquish the lead. And I feel like that's what Baltimore did here. You could tell that Pittsburgh was missing Shazier, and maybe he willed them to victory with his, you know, presence in everybody's hearts or whatever. But, you know, Alex Collins ran for 120 yards, and I guarantee you that if Shazier was there, Collins would have had less than 100 yards because he's that good of a run defender. So, I don't know. Take of it what you will. Pittsburgh wasn't caught looking ahead to the game with New England, but Pittsburgh pulled one out and played with fire and Big Dipper.
Indeed. Well, Let me read you Tom Brady's last 3 road defeats. Are you ready?
Sure.
At Miami. At
Miami.
Miami.
At Miami.
At Miami. Yep. He's 7-9 lifetime against the Dolphins in Miami. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. I know you said you didn't watch the game. You had no interest in watching the game. Miami disguised their defense all night. I think the Patriots are lucky that this wasn't more than a touchdown defeat because they looked out of sync all night. Brady was getting mad. I don't know if it was at himself or his wide receivers, but he was underthrowing them. He was overthrowing them. Kenyon Drake was both the leading rusher and leading receiver for the
Dolphins.
And no joke, my wife was down here in the basement watching. No, well, not really watching, but doing what she was doing. And Cutler was scrambling, and I actually walked downstairs. I saw the play. I said, "Watch out, Cutler!" And I was like, "What did I just say that for?" Like literally, I said that out loud so she could hear it as well. I'm like, "What am I doing that for?" But he was having such a good game. 3 touchdowns. Patriots' big thing in this game was they went 0 and 11 on 3rd downs. First time since 1991 that has happened to New England.
Wow.
So, New England, I don't know. I think they might have been caught looking ahead. Maybe they just don't like going down to Miami for some reason. I mean, who doesn't want to go down to Miami in December when you're up in a northeastern state where it's cold? So maybe they thought it was a little mini vacation. I don't know. But New England looked out of sorts. Miami played a great game. You know, you got to give credit to not only Gase, but the offense and also their defense. Their defense really kept New England guessing all night. And they had 3 shots at Brady. You know, I've never seen older quarterbacks like Brady and Manning just kind of whip the ball down and then fall down to the ground before. And it's been really apparent the last couple of years of each's career. I don't know how much longer Brady's going to play for, but it's just amazing. Like, oh, I don't want to get hit. Well, of course, nobody wants to get hit, but, you know, when you fall down in a house of cards, it doesn't look good.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think in the playoffs, people are going to be like, oh, he's a flopper, but he'll still get the calls because he's Tom Brady.
Well, we got no calls on Monday night, so.
Well, you know, hey, a broken clock is right twice a day, right? I mean,
that's right, it is.
So, look, I will say this. Can we finally admit that Kenyon Drake is a pretty good ball player?
He's getting touches what he needs.
I'm telling you, dude.
He's getting the playing time because Damien Williams is injured. I think if Williams does come back anytime soon, I think you're going to see a little bit more of a timeshare. But yes, Drake can run the ball. He can catch the ball, which is what Miami loves about him.
He was awesome in Miami.
He can make people miss the open field. So yes, Kenyon Drake is a better than serviceable running back right now.
I loved him in Alabama. I loved him in Alabama. But anyway, all right, Jacksonville, Seattle. There's only one thing to talk about with this game. Jacksonville beat them, as we predicted they would. Great defense, will always outperform a singular show on offense, and that bared fruit. But when I would think of this game, and I see somebody like Michael Bennett barrel rolling into the knees of the other team and trying to blow up the victory formation and get penalized and not thrown out of the game the first time, but then does it a second time and then gets thrown out of the game. And then you've got another Seattle defender picking a fight on the next play during a victory formation, gets thrown out of the game, and then decides to Ron Artest it by trying to get into a fight with a fan. I don't care what they throw at you. The New York Yankees had batteries thrown at them in center field against the Red Sox in the playoffs. They got in the dugout and they walked it away. And you're some big, tough jock that's going to go take on a drunk, overweight, out of shape 40-year-old man who threw something at you? Are you kidding me? But then I remember Pete Carroll's their head coach. And Pete Carroll, I'm going to say something I never say, but I'm going to say it here. Pete Carroll puts the ass in class. He always has. He always will. And you could sit there and say, well, he tried to go out there and say something to his players. First of all, you're an idiot. Secondly, think about what you just said. The man had a timeout in his hip pocket. If he really wanted to send a message, he'd have burned a tee, he'd have pulled him out, and he would have gotten before the pressers and said, this will not be tolerated. And Michael Bennett and Johnson will both be suspended for next week's game against the Los Angeles Rams in Seattle. They will not see the field, and they better be ready to play Dallas because we're going to need them. That's what you do. But, you know, the league's supposed to suspend you for a game when you get ejected from a game under certain circumstances. And believe me, this qualified. Health of the player safety and inciting a fight. And then you've got another a-hole that tries to go into the stands and fight the fans, and you don't suspend that guy for a game? They're going to be able to play this week. So anybody out there who wants to defend Pete Carroll, when you look at the starting lineup and you see Johnson and Bennett playing on that team, you have zero credibility in your argument. Zero. The man is garbage. He's classless, he's a scumbag, and I promise you he coaches that way. Those players did what they did because they are a direct reflection of their head coach. They always have been, and they always will be, and that's any team in football. And the coaches that the team isn't a direct reflection of, those coaches get fired because they lose the locker room. So either Pete Carroll has no control of his players, and he's lost his locker lost his locker room, or they're a direct reflection of their coach. There's no in between. And you can put on a show and make it look like, you know, that's not a good thing to do, and you could say all the right things when you're being interviewed by the media that adores you and loves you because you're the Seahawks head coach. But to me, actions will always speak louder than words. While he condemned Bennett, he never once condemned Johnson. In his entire presser, did he even address what his player tried to do at the end of the game? So, I say bring on Bennett and Johnson. They're hotheads. And if I'm Whitworth, the left tackle of the Rams, I'm going to find out from Cam Robinson what was said at the end of that game, and I'm going to open the game with it. And I'm going to try to get them to do something stupid and get thrown out of the game, because it'll probably take about a half a quarter to do it. And in the meantime, I'm going to block my rear end off, and I'm going to open up gaping holes for Todd Gurley, and I'm going to insist that McVay hands him the ball. But this game will be remembered for the actions at the end. And what makes this different than what the Buccaneers did under Schiano is twofold. One, Schiano did it every single time. He was coaching it. He admitted he was coaching it. That's what his team did. Seattle has never done this in a game under Pete Carroll. They have never blown up a victory formation before. They're a bunch of sore losers. They're a bunch of cowards. They're a bunch of arrogant hotheads, and I told you that there was a crack in this armor when the season started. I told you that you'd start to see that defense start to crumble, and that's what we're watching, because they can't handle not being the best there was. You never were. You never were. You were a really good defense. You never reached the caliber of defense that the Denver Broncos had a couple years ago under Wade Phillips. You never reached the Pittsburgh Steelers caliber defense, and you certainly didn't reach the 49er level of defense that they played in the 80s and in the 90s, or the Giants, or the Bears, or the Ravens, because you didn't sustain it. So, I will let you talk on this if you wish, but I am neither surprised nor disappointed, because this is what I expect from this classless, no class, no taste organization who's been propped up by the media from day one, From the moment that stadium was built, we were told it was a difficult place to play, and their false start numbers annually every year are the same as teams that go 4-12 and 5-11. But I'm supposed to believe it's a really tough environment to play in. No, it's not. You want to be a tough environment to play in, then you damn well better have more false start penalties than a St. Louis Ram team that ended the year with 5 more than you had. I digress. E, speak on it if you wish.
Yeah, it was either late Sunday or Monday morning where the NFL said that they were not going to suspend the Seahawks for trying to go in the stands against the Jaguars, who their fans were throwing stuff at. And the Jaguars have already said that, but they're working closely with the NFL to find those fans who were throwing objects at the Seattle players. And if they do find them, they will not be allowed back in the stadium. So, I mean, at least Jacksonville's doing their part to try to make things right. If somebody's throwing something at me, it's always difficult to say, like, what you would do. But I can understand the frustration of, what are you throwing something at me for? Then maybe just trying to make a statement of some sort. I don't know. But I think if you would have gotten into the stands, I think you would have seen them suspended. Maybe for more of a game, but he didn't get up there because security got him down before he could climb up there. So, we'll see how this plays out on the Jacksonville side. But,
let me get.
In order to be one of those teams, where people respect or just don't really talk about, just because you lost is the way you lose. And if you lose with class, people are going to recognize that. If you don't, like Seattle sometimes does not, people are going to remember that and be like, okay, well, we're going to get under their skin, and we're going to try to get some of these guys in trouble or suspended or something. So there's always that level to where when you're in victory formation, there's no need to go at guys' knees. You're trying. I'll tell you what. The next time Jacksonville plays Seattle in 4 years, don't be surprised if Jacksonville tries to rough the score in Seattle. And I'll tell you why. Because if they're going to take me out, try to take us out in victory formation, what's not to say that, oh, you know what, I remember that, okay? And now, if you really want to play hardball, stop us first. We'll keep playing until the clock strikes 4-0. We'll even call timeout with 1 second left so we can run one more play.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and some teams remember that, keep that in the back of their heads.
Let me just end this with this point. The New York Yankees are a baseball team. When they're in center field, they have no shoulder pads, they have no helmet, they have no leg pads. They are in a jersey and underwear. They're getting batteries pelted at them in a playoff game. A big, strong football player wearing shoulder pads and leg pads gets a half-empty bottle of Gatorade thrown at him, and he's worried about getting injured, and how dare you do that, and I'm going to get angry over that? When's the last time you heard of a comedian who got like tomatoes and stuff thrown at him, which used to happen all the time, turn around and then go after the crowd? No, they just exit stage right. You're not very popular. Tweak your material. The NFL didn't suspend him, was not a surprise. I told Kate when it happened, as we were watching the game, I looked at my wife and said, neither one of them will be suspended next week. I guarantee it. Just like I knew Baltimore and Pittsburgh was going to be the Sunday night game, not the Rams and Eagles, just like I knew the Rams are going to lose to Philly in the second quarter, I knew these a-holes would not be suspended because the NFL is not going to touch their golden children. Now, they do like messing with the Patriots. I will give you that. But they are certainly not going to want to see Seattle affected in any way, shape, or form negatively. And I believe that entirely because they've been talking about Seattle winning the division all year long. And at no point have they had the division lead. At any point. this year, except for like maybe a week, 1 week, when they beat the Rams. And then they lost the next week, and they ended up losing that out anyway. So let me get to the Ram game. So Carson Wentz gets hurt. We all know that. I'm going to rewind the game a little bit. LT, text me. I was really upset with the way the game's going. And we scored. First of all, let me walk you through what went through my head. We stop them. We get an interception. Webster gets the pick. We score a touchdown. Philly's driving. I don't know if it was that drive or the next drive. I think it was the next drive. They score a touchdown. We get a chance to respond. I'm like, okay, let's do this. Rip off a 32-yard run with Todd Gurley. Penalty after he's tackled. I'm like, oh, something happened after the play. Holding on the center. They bring it back 20 yards from the line of scrimmage. Now it's 1st and 20 at the Rams 10 instead of being at the Philadelphia 45-yard line. And immediately my coaching radar went, bing! Uh-oh. What are these crazy cats up to? You're going to call that penalty? Okay. They're just going to call a really tight game, I guess, with holding. Because it was holding, but it wasn't holding. Like, he let him go as Gurley was going by him. So he didn't impede it entirely. But under the rules, you can call penalty on that. Sure, it's holding. Fine. But my radar's up. Philly goes up the field. Webster tears his Achilles tendon. I'm certain that's what the injury was. I have not seen the reports on that, so you can verify that for me, Eric. But he grabbed his Achilles tendon. I'm like, uh-oh. So then they scored, and they made it 14-7. The entire time on the drive, I'm like, well, that was holding. Well, that was holding. Well, you called that on the Rams. Okay, touchdown. Rams go 3 and out. They punt. Philly, I think it's the second quarter at this point. They're going up the field. And I might get this wrong, by the way, just FYI. I'm putting 50 minutes down is when we started the Ram talk. The Rams have, it's 3rd and it's like 3rd and 10. And Carson Wentz goes deep down the sidelines, and Tremaine Johnson makes a great play. Knocks the ball away. Guy gets up, Aguilar talks at him. Tremaine Johnson says something back at him and kind of waves incomplete. You see Aguilar with a big old smile on his face. They were clearly just talking to one another, giving each other a hard time. They both turn around and go back to the locker, to the huddle. Penalty. They call the 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on Tremaine Johnson. And I knew right then and there that this officiating crew stopped at Vegas on their way to the game and bet on the Eagles. And I text LT and I said the Rams will not win this game. I guarantee it. At that point, it was only 14-7. Now, Philly ends up scoring on that drive to make it 21-7. And he was like, oh, we got a great comeback. We're a third quarter team. I'm like, we're not winning. Sorry, we're not winning. I knew it. I knew the Rams were not going to win the game. As soon as that flag was thrown, a flag that has never been thrown before, and I will be surprised if it's thrown again. It is not thrown in a game of that magnitude where you can change the entire outcome. See, fixing football games, Eric, is real easy to do. It's not the amount of penalties you throw, it's when you throw them. Holding penalty after a 32-yard gain. Changes the entire complexion of the drive, doesn't it? When that holding penalty happens at the line of scrimmage. And it deflates the team a little bit. Calling an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty because the DB and the wide receiver were jawing back and forth in a joking manner, clearly stated by Aguilar's smile on his face. Well, now you've got, instead of punting the ball, you've got 1st and 10 at the Ram 30-yard line with Carson Wentz and a red-hot offense. Yeah, that makes a difference. That makes a huge difference. 21-7 as opposed to 14-7, giving the Rams the ball back? I'm telling you right now, the refs beat us on this game. It was hard for me to handle the Viking loss because Minnesota just kicked our teeth in. And I had to come to the realization that we weren't as good as I thought we were. Okay? The Seattle game was easy to get over because we gave them the friggin' game. Too many mistakes, 5 turnovers, penalties, a drop touchdown at the end of the game. We blew it. But when you lose a game because of the Zebras, who made a deliberate effort to make sure you lost the game, I got a real problem with that. And while it's real easy as an analyst to sit there and say, well, you shouldn't make it come down to an official's call, that's an impossibility as a player and a coach. Especially when you're going to call penalties in situations that don't ordinarily warrant a penalty. I mean, you've got the Seahawks blowing up the line of scrimmage and not getting flagged for it the initial time. And then you've got Tremaine Johnson getting a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty for saying something that caused Aguilar to laugh. Okay. Now, granted, the Rams fumbled the ball, but let's go through this logically for just a minute, and then I'll let you say your piece. They don't call that penalty on Tremaine Johnson, take 7 points off the board. Oh, by the way, because you took 7 points off the board, go ahead and take the final touchdown off the board for Philadelphia too, because that play doesn't happen that gives them the touchdown at the end of the game. So you take 14 points off the board. Now here's another penalty that cost the Rams big time. It's bad when the announcers who've been announcing the game all game long have been rooting for Philadelphia, and they comment that they don't know where the penalty came from or who committed the penalty. Because at the end of the game, Philadelphia kicks a field goal from 52 yards out to make it 37-35. They throw a penalty for leverage. No one on the Rams team used leverage to get up over the pile. No one. Even the announcers who were rooting for Philly all game long said no one. Even the former referee was like, I don't know what this guy saw. Now, see, that wasn't just a 15-yard penalty, Eric. That was a 2-minute penalty. That took an extra 2 full minutes off the clock. 2 full minutes off the clock. So the Rams would have had the ball with 2:01 to play instead of 2 minutes to play. So you take those 2 penalties. I'm not even going to count the holding one because under the letter of the law it was holding. But you take those 2 penalties that should never have been called, you got a 17-point swing right there. Because the Philly doesn't score that touchdown, which means the last one doesn't happen. There's your 14 points. And the field goal, well, I guess that still would have gone through because the first one was good and they took the points off the board. So 14-point swing. And 2 minutes. 14 points off the clock and 2 minutes off the clock. Now, would the Rams have marched up the field, gotten in a field goal range, and Legatron saved the day? Maybe. Maybe not. But I certainly would have been much happier as a fan watching the game to make sure that the outcome was determined by the play on the field, not the officials reffing the game. And I'm disgusted because I still think the Rams are better than Philly, and I don't think the Eagles beat the Rams. And I'm sitting here going, we lost a game to a team that we were better than because the officials stole it from us. Now, Carson Wentz stays in the game. Maybe the outcome's different. But I would argue if Webster stayed in the game, the outcome could have been very different too. But the fact that we lost our number 1 corner to an ankle injury probably for the season, that hurts. That's the Seahawks. They understand that pain. So, there's not a lot for me to say about this game except for the fact that, congratulations to the Eagles. When the officials are in your favor, you duck your head, you play the good sportsmanship role, you get in the plane, and you laugh about on your ride home back to Philadelphia. And you take the W, and you go, thank you very much. Adios, vio con Dios. But as a player on the other team, I feel sorry for Seattle, and that's saying a lot. Because this is going to be one very angry Ram team on Sunday afternoon. And if Seattle thinks they're pissed, you lost the game. We had it stolen from us. And we remember 5 turnovers, 10 penalties, and a drop touchdown. I hope they do, because they're probably piddling down their legs just a tiny bit. Eric, I've monopolized the conversation for almost 10 minutes. Your take.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed in the way I saw the Rams not be able to stopped the Eagles when they needed it most. The penalties hurt them a lot. You touched on that. But I'm not going to really get into much more than what you said, but I like the way Gurley was utilized throughout the game. I like the way Cooper Kupp actually came out strong in this game for 118 yards receiving.
Yeah.
The one play that Philly needed to make to sustain a drive to keep going was basically that Nick Foles third down pass to Nelson Aguilar.
8 yards.
That was a big play right there.
Mm-hmm. I
Huge
agree.
play right there. And that's coming in cold off the bench and having rarely played this year. Basically, if you come in as a backup, you're mainly handing the ball off, trying to run out the clock. But they put the ball in his hands, and the Eagles have a decent backup to where they can still go far in the playoffs. I don't think they're going to go as far as they were with Wentz, but that's a devastating injury for the
Eagles.
For the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm gonna tell you is that Nick Foles is lucky because he's got a very, very cheap contract for next year. His base salary is $1 million. Regarding 2018. Now, if he was a free agent and Wentz was on the shelf, I'll tell you what. Just for argument's sake, I could have seen Sam Bradford going back there.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, not going to happen. I'm sorry. It was $1 million for this year. In 2018, it's $4 million, and then he's a free agent. So he's a very cheap starting quarterback for the Eagles next year as they wait for Wentz to come back from his injury, and who knows when that's going to be. If they start right after Labor Day, that's 9 months away from today. Is he going to be as mobile as he was? Is it going to be October, November, December? And if it ends up being December, are you going to hold him out for the whole season? And that's things that they're going to have to take into account. They're going to have to find a backup for Foles because the guy that they have, never heard of the guy.
Yeah.
However, Philly's got some questions to answer, and they also got some questions, and they need to look at themselves in the mirror, especially coming up. But as far as the Rams go, they're still in first. They're a game up. Well, a game up in the win-loss record, but half game with Seattle. And they got a big game coming up. So, they got to put it behind them. They got to go up to, as Anthony doesn't like the term, but a tough environment. But, the Rams have had success there. So maybe they can make it LA North, far north.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's just, they just have to look at tape, see where they messed up, work on it. McVay is a good coach, good head coach to get the ship ready for the Rams. Utilize Gurley. This is a game that I would pound Gurley into that Seahawks defensive line. Make them stop them, which will open up a lot more for Kupp over the middle. Higbee and Robert Woods is expected back. So, it was a tough loss. I watched the game, a lot of the second half, and they were right there neck and neck with Philly. So I know the Rams can keep up with the Vikings. I know that they can keep up with the Saints. They won one, lost one there. And I know that the Rams can keep up with Philly. I knew it was going to be a high-scoring game.
Yep.
Okay? So they're still able to score those points. It's not like they're getting shut down. The only game they got shut down in is Minnesota, when they only scored 7. Mm-hmm. So it is an offense that's capable of putting up points in a hurry. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. Yeah, it stinks that you lost a game that you should have won that was taken away from you by the refs. I like to say it happens to every team. It's just hard to go back and find where it's happened to every team. But it does happen where it's just not your day.
Well, and I think for me, the reason this one stung so badly is I was getting flashbacks of the year Seattle went to the playoffs at 7-9. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, they played the Rams. If the Rams won, they would have been 8-8. They would have won the division. The reality is that season, that was the first season I had Sunday Ticket. I was so pissed at the end of that season, I canceled Sunday Ticket, and I didn't order it again until the Rams went back to L.A. Okay? That's how long I went without NFL Sunday Ticket because I couldn't handle it. Because I had Sunday Ticket and I watched every single Ram game, and the Rams had 5 games where the official at the end of the game either directly stole the win from the Rams or overtly took it away from them. There were 5 games the Rams should have won had the officials just called the game down the line. One of them, we were playing San Francisco. There was a pass over the middle. Okay, O.J. Atogwe knocked the ball away, stopped the 49ers on 4th down. Rams had the game won. It's over. They called pass interference. The dude never made contact with the 49er receiver. San Francisco kicks the field goal to force overtime, and then they win it in OT. The game was over. There was no time on the clock when Atogwe knocked the ball away. So, and that was just one game. The Raider game was another one where they called defensive pass interference on the Rams corner down the right sideline that put the Raiders in field goal range at the end of the game to win it in Oakland. And I'm just sitting there going, are you joking me? Like, it was a flashback to then. And I remember at the time I didn't make the connection, but now that I look back at it, it was clear what they wanted. They wanted Seattle in the postseason. They didn't want the Rams in there. They were pumping up the 12th man like there was no tomorrow. I never even heard of the 12th man until that game between the Rams and Eagles, or Seahawks. I was like, what's the 12th man? What? Oh, okay, they're talking about the Seahawk fan base. I guess. I've never heard of them. I've never seen a Seahawk fan in my life in person. I've seen them on television at the stadium, but okay. And then all of a sudden, Seattle wins the game. Now I go back and look at them, I'm like, well, of course they want them in the playoffs. They'd been pumping them up all year long. So it's very annoying when things like this happen. But it's not as annoying as this. And I'll end it with this. Why is Jared Goff not in the conversation for MVP? The man has less than 10 interceptions. He's had several 300-yard games. He's played really good competition. He's carved them up for the most part. And even in the losses, people have gone back and said it's not his fault. I don't expect him to win it, but why isn't he at least mentioned in the conversation?
If you're looking for an answer for me, I don't have one.
Okay.
Because he's not Tom Brady, he's not Carson Wentz, and he's not Drew Brees, even though I don't believe Brees should be in the conversation this year.
Okay, but Carson Wentz, a 2-year guy. Jared Goff's a 2-year guy. Both their teams are doing really well. I would think you want to promote these 2 young quarterbacks, so why not put them in the MVP race against each other, even though you know it's going to go to Carson Wentz, and at least give the other guy a little bit of credit? This is what the NBA does.
I think it's going to go to Wentz after missing 3 games, no?
Well, no, I don't either. Because he missed the last 3 games. If he missed the first 3 games, it'd be a different conversation. I don't disagree with that. But Wentz is still going to be a finalist for the MVP. And what I find very irritating is you're not even putting Jared Goff in the conversation. This is where the NBA does it better than the NFL. The NBA promotes all of their stars. All of them. The NFL only promotes certain stars on certain teams. And the rest of them are just, they're garbage.
So who would be your top 5?
My top 5 MVPs?
Yeah.
Okay. I would go with Tom Brady. And by the way, he'd be my only quarterback. Tom Brady. Well, there'd be 2. Tom Brady and Jared Goff would be my 2 quarterbacks. Wentz, I'd leave him on the list as a finalist, but take him off because I don't think, I think there are other guys that deserve to be on there. Okay? I would throw in, Goff, Brady, Antonio Brown, Todd Gurley, and Kamara. And if you don't want to give it to a rookie, fine, Mark Ingram. Who's done more for their teams this year than those 5? And if you want to know who I'd give it to, right now, Well, I'm going to sound like a homer, but I'd probably go with Todd Gurley because what would the Rams be without Todd Gurley right now? But I want to say Antonio Brown. I mean, actually, I'm going to say Antonio Brown. I know a wide receiver's never won it, and if Jerry Rice didn't win it, then why should Antonio Brown win it? But you know what? That's stupid thinking. Right now, it's Antonio Brown. It's not even close. Maybe Goff. Well, that's not true. Antonio Brown and Todd Gurley, I think, are a close 1 and 2. And then you could throw Brady in there, and then you could throw Goff in there. And then if you want to put Wentz in there as a consolation prize for a season, you can do that. But that would be my top 5. Ingram.
Where do you pull Le'Veon Bell?
There's too many games he's gone MIA totally.
He's the leading rusher.
I get that. But it took him the first 3 weeks of the season to even show up to the stadium. Okay? Because he was just nowhere to be found the first 3 games, even though he was playing. And then he gets shut down this week because they had to. So, you got to show up for games. Todd Gurley's been there every single time. Antonio Brown has been there nearly every single time. So, you got to leave somebody out. You told me to pick 5. Would you take Le'Veon Bell over Ingram?
Yeah, I did ask you where Bell was in that. So, if you didn't step 6, I would give you credit.
Okay, well, no, he's definitely going to be number 6. I had to leave somebody out. I don't think there's 7 guys in the conversation, to be perfectly honest with you. So, yeah, I would put Le'Veon Bell at 6, but unfortunately I got to leave him out because I only think 5 go anyway. But I just think it's funny that Jared Goff is being, he's a second-year quarterback, but, the Eagles are devastated without Carson Wentz. He's also a second-year guy. And Carson Wentz has been as valuable to his team this year as Jared Goff has been to his team. They're identical in numbers almost unilaterally across the board. And I seem to recall the game that you were all hot and horny over Carson Wentz over. He had 4 touchdowns and 199 yards. Jared Goff threw 3 touchdowns for over 350 yards with no picks. So, WTF? But that's the way it's going to be. Goff just has to understand that. It's funny to me. You want the NFL to be successful in LA, and then you do everything you can to make sure you don't promote the team in LA. It's almost like the Rams went to LA, and then the NFL did everything they could to submarine their success. So, and it starts for me with Hard Knocks. Why are you going to do Hard Knocks their first year in LA? Why are you doing that? It's already going to be a circus. You're going to add that crap show to the mix? Because that's brilliant. And then you go ahead and throw the Chargers in year 2. Good job, NFL. You really know what you're doing. That's like the kid that says, I don't want to get in trouble, and then gets in trouble. Like that, my 4-year-old will do that. I don't want to be in timeout. Why'd you get in timeout? Because, yeah. So either you don't want a team in LA, or you do. And I would think you'd promote them just a tiny bit. But no, we're still promoting the Steelers, the Patriots, the Packers, the Cowboys, the frickin' Broncos were promoted before this year started. And then you get all over Carson Wentz like he's your hot girlfriend. You can't wait to brag and show everyone. Meanwhile, you've got a lot of other stars in this league that are just completely being neglected. So, it's a very frustrating situation in La La Land. Because I feel like that's where we're at. Anyway, anything you want to add, Eddie? Who's your top 5?
She basically named them. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah? Nice.
That's exactly what I was thinking because obviously Brady, like I said, Brady doesn't belong in there because he's handed the ball off too many times. He's not going to get his perennial 5,000 yards or his annual 5,000 yards. Brown's having a monster year. Obviously Goff and Wentz. Like you said, Goff has been playing really well. The Minnesota game, again, it's one game. And then I've been touting Mark Ingram as a possible potential MVP candidate the way he's played this year.
So would you put Gurley in now that Wentz is injured?
I mean, I'd probably wait till after week 17 to see how Gurley panned out. But if we're doing it right now, I think Le'Veon Bell's a little bit more has the better numbers.
Well, I can't argue that. I mean, he's the leading rusher, so.
Yeah, I mean, so I would probably put Le'Veon, and Gurley would be just on the outside looking in.
So we just flipped that. That's all. All right. Cool beans. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Keep subscribing.
Hold on. Don't sign off just yet. We got a Thursday game.
Oh, God darn it. Who cares? All right, the Peyton Manning Pony Bowl.
Yeah, you're right. Who cares? I'm probably not going to watch this game. I don't care about the Broncos. I want the Colts to win. And I think the Colts are going to win. And that's why I'm picking the Colts. I think they're going to win.
I'm definitely picking the Colts. They're tough at home. This isn't Mile High. If they were going to Denver, it would be a different story. And I would recommend to all of the fans out there, I have advice. If you want to see the Colts versus Broncos, YouTube this. Are you ready? I want you to type in 1988 Broncos at Colts. See if it comes up. I got that game finally. So happy. It is my favorite game. It is my childhood memory that I will tell this story so y'all know what kind of a football fanatic I am. In 1988, I was 9 years old. Halloween day, or Halloween night, October 31st. My favorite Ram of all time at that point, Eric Dickerson, was of course on the Colts. They were going to play on Monday night against the Broncos. My dad comes in. He's like, all right, we're going trick-or-treating. And I went, no, we're not. I'm watching football. I'm 9 years old. I'm turning down free candy to watch a football game. Okay? As if that wasn't bad enough, my dad makes me go. I go crying. I'm screaming. I'm crying. I don't want to go. I'm 9, and I want to watch football over free candy. So he kicks me out, takes me. We have to go trick-or-treating. We get to the third house on our street, and I ring the doorbell, and the guy comes to the door, and I could see the game, right? And like they're having basically a party. There's a bunch of food and chips and salsa and a bunch of people in the living room, and they're all, talking, and the Broncos are playing the Colts, and I was like looking, and the guy goes, what are you doing? I'm like, I just want to see how the Rams were doing, or the Colts were doing real quick. He's like, you guys want to watch the game? And I looked at my dad, and my dad went, Jesus, yes, fine. So we go into the house, and we watched the entire first half, which the Colts had like a 45-10 lead. Spoiler alert, the Colts do win. But they blow the doors off of Denver. And Dickerson has a phenomenal game, and it was just a great game to watch, and it was a primetime game, Broncos at Colts. I end up leaving and doing the rest of my trick-or-treating in the second half because my dad's like, we're only staying for the first half. So we left, I think it was the first half. So we left and did my trick-or-treating, and I never saw the second half of the game, and then I finally got the game, and I'm really excited. So if you want to watch, a really good Colt Bronco game, YouTube 1988 Broncos at Colts. It was a Halloween night. That's what I'm going to probably be doing tomorrow. I'm going to put that bad boy in just to do it. Because I don't care about this game either. It's two garbage teams in a primetime matchup, and at least the good news is they won't be playing on Sunday. So we'll have a little bit better selection on week 15. But anyway, that was my fun little story, and just how ridiculous I am with football.
So two things I want to add really quick.
Mm-hmm.
It's been reported that, obviously, I believe last week I said that Goodell signed his extension. It runs through 2023. It's going to be his last year. It's not 2021 because of the strike. But 2023 is the last time that he said it's his last contract, and he'll look for a successor during that time. So So you have that. And then, with the whole, and I don't mean to get political on this, but with the whole feelings of when Harvey Weinstein Weinstein, I believe it was, got outed for everything that he's done, it started basically a trickle-down effect. Well, it's hit the NFL Network.
I heard about this.
Unfortunately, there's been 3 or 5 individuals who have been suspended by the network. One of them is Marshall Falk. Another is Heath Evans. So I know you love the Heath Evans rant every now and then, as far as going off against him. But there have been a couple of others. So, be careful what you do in the workplace. I don't foresee these guys being back anytime soon, if ever. Big blow. In case you guys liked some of what they said, I'm not saying you like Keith Evans and what he said, or maybe it was Marshall Falk you like more. But you have that. I also want to say that you're going to get Kurt Warner on 2 Thursday night telecasts coming up off Chris Collinsworth. So you're going to have to listen to Kurt Warner and see how he does for a couple of games as well.
I'll be curious to see who the NFL Network gets to replace Marshall Falk, but I'm going to take.
They haven't been terminated technically. They've just been.
No, I just mean for his suspension. Look, I'm going to take the same approach with this that I took with Weinstein, that I took with Moore, that I took with Franken, that I've taken with any of the celebrities. Anytime an accusation like that is made, I think it's extremely important to hold judgment, to hold criticism until you know the whole story. It very well could be as disgusting as it appears on the surface, and, they should rightfully be terminated if that's the case. It also could be a disgruntled employee trying to capitalize off of a movement that has no consequences if false allegations are levied. So I think it's important for the livelihood because, and I think people forget to mention this, when an accusation like this is made, yes, concern for the victim should be priority. But if it's a false accusation, they walk away unscathed, and the person that was accused inevitably has a marriage that falls apart, has a career that falls apart, and they don't get to recover as easily. So I just want people to hold reservation back, take these allegations seriously, make sure that we're not criticizing the victim in this situation, because I think that's important. But I also think we can't immediately assume every accusation is accurate. There's a reason in this country our judicial system is innocent until proven guilty. And we have a tendency in this country as a society to not follow that if it's not our guy. You know how much I don't like Heath Evans. But I'm not going to sit here and say Heath Evans did something wrong until I know for sure that's what the evidence indicates. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm surprised, or not surprised, I should say, because I am surprised. Because no matter how I feel about the man as an analyst, he does have a family that's going to be affected by this directly, whether he did it or not. And I think it's important for us to keep that in mind. Again, the victim should absolutely be a priority in protecting and making sure they have the ability to come out and speak on issues like this. But I also want us to guard against, the mob mentality and you're guilty until proven innocent. That's not how the system works. I just can't stress that enough. I just think that it's a crappy situation because if it did happen, kudos to this lady for coming out and speaking out and having the courage to do it. And, this hashtag #MeToo movement, good for it if it's getting more women like this to come out. But I think we also have to be realistic to understand that there may be other women that come out just to come out. And this woman was 51 when she was terminated, and she mentioned in the article that I read that she was replaced with a 30-year-old. I don't know why that would matter. you're talking about sexual misconduct directed towards you. Why do you care if they hired a younger woman? Like, that's a red flag for me. That sounds like a disgruntled employee. So I want to make sure that we all take a minute and a breath, because if these allegations are true, then these men should absolutely be terminated, removed from their position. We have no place for them in society. This isn't a brothel. It's a workplace. But at the same time, if they are innocent and they didn't commit these acts, we need to understand what the long-term effects are on the person being accused of the crime. Because it doesn't just end with, oh, okay, I'm just kidding, it didn't really happen. Inevitably, their marriage gets busted up, their kids don't look at them the same way, the workplace doesn't look at them the same way, and they become a little gun-shy. Because, and then it becomes this very unhospitable work environment for that person, and they inevitably end up leaving anyway. So the likelihood, in my opinion, of Falk or Evans or Ike Taylor coming back to the NFL Network, even if the allegations prove to not be true, is probably slim to none, because it's no longer a safe environment for them to work in. And obviously, if the allegations are true, and we absolutely should consider that to be the case, as well. Like I said, they're innocent until proven guilty, but these accusations are serious and they should be taken as such. Obviously, they won't be back either. So that's kind of my take on that. I wasn't going to bring that up, Eric, but I think it's fair that you did, because I think that's a message that needs to be levied out there, because I just think there's a lot of hostility and a lot of craziness right now. Go ahead and chime in on this if you want.
Yeah, no, I said all pretty much I wanted to say about it. I mean, I don't know how much I want to get into it, but it just seems like if somebody says something that somebody else did, and they could just be saying it, just say it, kind of like Ezekiel Elliott's girlfriend saying, oh, she wants to ruin him, and she did what she could to get him suspended or whatnot. I know the NFL takes stuff like that seriously, but when they don't find anything, or when other investigators don't find anything, that should be it. It shouldn't be held. It shouldn't be held to for more disciplinary action by Goodell or by the network itself.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel. I think. Do I think this happened? I don't know. I don't want to speculate on who said what, or because I read. I just read on the NFL Network. It was Marshall Falk was named. Ike Taylor was named. Heath Evans was named. Warren Sapp was named. And Donovan McNabb was named. And it said what they did, but it could be somebody trying to make a buck. It could be serious. Again, allegations like that are serious, should be taken seriously, but if there's no evidence or nobody finds anything, then the name should be cleared.
Well, while I said that there was a red flag for me, there was also an eye-opening comment in there. And we know what kind of a scumbag Warren Sapp is, especially us here in Arizona, when he was hiring prostitutes to go to his hotel room the night before the Super Bowl. And we know what kind of a human being he was. So when you mention Warren Sapp and some of his allegations, I think that does bring credibility to the story. And I don't think it's wrong for the NFL to say you're suspended until further investigation of this comes forward. It's done to protect both the employee and the former employer. Because if they're out there on TV and they decide to plead their case before the national audience, well, they have a much bigger sounding board than this poor woman who's now no longer working and living at home. So it's the right move. If the allegations are true, and I think you'll agree with this, they should be terminated. If the allegations aren't true, then that should be the end of it. But as I just explained in my point earlier, the the likelihood of them coming back either way isn't, I think, very likely. It's a difficult conversation because we know this really does happen. So I think there needs to be some carefulness in proceeding with this, because the victim should be taken seriously. But obviously, like I said before, I can't reiterate this enough, in this country, our justice system is you are innocent until proven guilty. And far too often as a society, we determine the outcome before we get the facts. And that's where I'm at. I just want to wait and see more info as it comes forward and see where this proceeds.
Right.
So hopefully we didn't upset too many people, but that's a very real topic that hit, and the genuineness of it couldn't be more sincere. Me and Eric didn't discuss this. He just brought it onto the show, and I think it was a good addition. If anything, it shows how we want to bring people together. And, you know, anytime I can do a man of monologue, as my seniors like to say that I teach in econ, they're like, you should do man of monologues. I think that was a good one right there, even though it was on my show. And I appreciate you trying to make this as legitimate of a sports show as we can possibly make it, because I will tell you one thing, none of the sports shows today have talked about this. Mom has been the word. And that's a little disheartening. So we'll see if this proceeds into tomorrow or not. But it's very interesting how that kind of works out. Anyway, that's it for me. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I'm good.
All right. Well, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Eric.
And we want you guys to subscribe, like the video, share it, talk about it, get more subscribers. We appreciate all the new subscribers. And all the old ones, of course, you guys are rock stars. We love you. And go Rams!